Welcome, everybody. Hopefully, everybody had a good, happy holidays and continuing to do so this month. We are going to recap Miami's 9-3 start, 1-0 in the ACC. If you're just jumping on board with this team, but now they're getting ready to the full slate of ACC competition. What's going on, Cal?
Not much. Hopefully your holidays are good. Might have been busy, but I'm ready to go. This next stretch is going to be very important to this season.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's been good for me. Hopefully, good for you as well. But yeah, college basketball. Huge fan. I know you are too.
Oh
So for
yeah.
people that are just kind of jumping on board with this team, because it's been football season and maybe some people are just getting in the basketball program. And again, ACC competition coming up in full slate. Let's just kind of recap, Cal. What stands out to you with this team? Maybe some positives, and we'll kind of break down some things more in detail as we go along. But just what's kind of standing out to you, for people that haven't watched, and just kind of with where this team is at so far throughout the season here.
I think one of the big positives is the way the offense has started playing this year. In the last couple of years, there was a more ISO based offense. It seems like you'd get a lot of ISO plays with a lot of the guards, whether it was Isaiah Wong or Chris Likes. But this season, excuse me, there's been like five players that have been able to score. They've run that 5-out offense at times where Jordan Miller and Sam Wardenberg have both really been able to space the floor. Jordan Miller started to rebound a lot more recently, and you're seeing a more balanced scoring effort from Miami, whether it's Cam McGusty, who's been awesome this season, or it's Isaiah Wong or Charlie Moore's had his nights. Sam Wardenberg's had a very good return season so far. He's been very efficient. And you're getting a lot of scoring from a lot of different places, which makes this team a very dangerous team at this time of the season.
And it's certainly what they wanted to go with, right? At the beginning of the year, we started to see how they were going to rotate that fourth guy, kind of that power forward spot, going with Jordan Miller. So it was clear, and based on some of the things we talked about in the preseason, they definitely wanted to go with this smaller lineup, kind of rotate around. And they have talked about, getting guys more involved in recent years, even though they've had some isolation stuff, which has been a little bit tricky because guys like Isaiah Wong and Chris Likes were so good at ISO plays. But yeah, they definitely want to pass the ball around. They definitely want to get guys involved while utilizing their scores. And kind of looking at this team, they've won their last 5 games, which is good. It has not happened at Miami in the last couple of years. So that's good. Just get that winning vibe, that winning environment. I think to start off that winning streak, those wins over Penn State and Clemson felt big to me. And not necessarily that those two teams are great. They are top 100 teams according to Ken Palm, but the way they played against Alabama was very disappointing, and that was their third loss of the year, with only 4 wins. So at 4-3, it felt like a pivotal point already in the early going. So they get those 2 wins against Penn State and Clemson, and I felt like that was very good for momentum right there.
And they both came in different ways. I mean, you touch on the Orlando tournament over break. They were not good in that tournament. They were basically outplayed in every single game. They lost by double figures twice. They kind of eked that win against North Texas, but those 2 wins, one at Penn State, which is never an easy place to play when you go up north, and then Clemson, who this season are 9-4. They just beat South Carolina by double figures. I don't know how much it was by, but they beat them by a good amount. They're at 9-4 now. They've had to dig different ways in both games. That Penn State game, not a lot of teams were scoring. They came out of the half and shot really well from three. And then the Clemson game, they were down for basically the entire game up until the last 8 minutes to go, where they were able to find a bunch of shooting. Sam Wardenberg was awesome in both games. And then Jordan Miller, who I mentioned before, really struggled in those first 8 games. He had just 2 threes in those first 8 games, really wasn't spreading the floor. Still relatively struggling from three, but he had 3 3-pointers in that second half alone against Clemson. And the thing about this team that feels different is it feels more responsible this year. McGusty said it after their win against Stetson last week that, that Orlando tournament kind of showed them, okay, we're going to lose games, but I think the exact quote was, we don't take L's, we learn lessons. And they went back, and you can tell that they've tried to improve in every area. They really struggled in those first 7 games of the year, and I think that's why they've been so good over the last 5 games.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. You touch on those 2 wins. They kind of like a slow down, grinded out game against Penn State, and then the score gets up there against Clemson. So definitely the scoring was different. They showing that they can win both ways, or different ways. And they played teams they were overmatched and teams they were supposed to win that next three. But it's just good that they're winning. Again, this is a team that has struggled to win games, and it wasn't looking good at one point during the season. So I think they're finding their identity. You're talking about some roles being established. I think is good too, and I think these are all positives. I think that they are getting better, and I think that's what you want to see as the season goes on. And again, just getting ready to get into ACC play. One of the things that's kind of standing out, you touched on the offensive efficiency that seems to be going well. I think they're doing a good job of cutting down on their turnovers,
Mhm.
which is good too, because again, you're allowing your offensive guys that can score more opportunities, more reps, and it definitely feels like they're really establishing their roles in terms of their rotation there too.
Well, the two biggest things that have stood out within the offense, at least during this win streak, have been getting to the free throw line and executing at the free throw line, and how good they've been with the basketball. Miami are third in the ACC in free throw percentage at 75.2 right now, and they've gotten to the line the fourth most in the ACC. They got to the line ridiculously in those first couple of games. We touched on Cam McGusty before when we did the interview with him, how many times he was getting to the line, and that's stuck out over the last couple of games. And then the assist to turnover ratio has been great. It's tied for third in the ACC this year. Last game against Stetson, they had, I believe, 20 assists and just 6 turnovers. And if you're able to keep turnovers to single digits within ACC play, you're going to have a lot better chance to win these games.
And just to recap a little bit about their percentages, you touched on where they rank in free throw percentage. So they're 55th according to Ken Palm and adjusted efficiency on offense, which is really good. You know that they've not had that kind of efficiency, and they're doing well on their the free throw percent, but also their 2-point field goal percent. Their 3-point field goal percent is improving as the season's gone on. That has been an issue, and if you're going to play small and you want to do some space stuff, especially with that 4-man, you've got to be able to make shots from the perimeter and take advantage of playing small. And I think they're doing a good job of that. It feels like they're in some more tempo type games that they want to go to, play a little bit faster. So again, cutting down on turnovers and shooting at a higher percentage than they were early on. So Cal, big week or big stretch coming up, 3 home games to start this ACC stretch. And we have to keep saying that it's not beginning ACC play because they did play the one against Clemson, then they go back to non-conference. So, but now it's full ACC play. So they got NC State, Wake Forest, and Syracuse all at home on the schedule as of now. Everybody knows the schedule is changing rapidly. What's kind of the keys and maybe for this this stretch here as Miami prepares for I feel like a pivotal stretch in terms of, again, momentum, because they do have this tough one right after that, kind of their better teams in the conference getting ready to face those teams. But the keys for this one, and maybe how many wins do you feel like they need to get out of this 3 here?
It's funny you mentioned the wins, because going into this stretch back at the start of the season or even at the start of December, you would think that the best team Miami would play during these 3 games was either NC State or Syracuse. But with how bad the ACC has been this year, NC State's on a 3-game losing streak, I believe. Syracuse are, scrambling around 500, and Wake Forest have been one of the best teams, not just in the ACC, but in college basketball in terms of unranked opponents this year. And for these 3 games, I think I'm looking at one player in particular. And obviously it takes more than a team effort. But the way Cam McGusty's played this year, I think one thing that stands out over these next 3 stretches is how McGusty has been talking about how he wants to improve his game this year. He's 4th in the ACC in scoring this year at 18.5. He's been dynamite at home this year. I believe he's averaging 22.2 points per game at Watsco Center this season. But every time after one of those games, he talks about how he wants to be the one guarding the opponent's best player. He wants to take more pride in his defense this year. Well, this is going to be his best opportunity, because on Wednesday against NC State, he's going to be guarding Darion Sebron, who's 3rd in the ACC in scoring. And then against Wake Forest on New Year's Day, he's going to be guarding Alondes Williams, who's tied for 1st in the ACC in scoring. So he's going to be a big factor in these games. But I also think the biggest factor has to be maybe not winning the battle on the boards, but at least competing in that, because they are the worst team in the ACC in rebounding right now. They're last in offensive rebounds. They got a lot of second chance points against Stetson in that last non-conference game. But if you can at least keep it close, you don't have to win the board battle, but if you can at least keep it within 5, maybe 8, then you have a very good chance to win these games. If you get blasted on the boards, then it's going to be very tough to beat teams like Syracuse and NC State and Wake Forest.
Let's talk. Let's stay with Cam McGusty. The season he's had so far, it's been very impressive to me. Both ends of the court, you touched on it. What stands out to me, you touched on his scoring, but the efficiency which he's doing it. And it's not just this season, what the numbers look like this season. It's where he's been throughout his career compared to where he's at now. So just kind of want to rattle some things off. His first 4 seasons, two at Oklahoma, two at Miami, just to kind of show you with where he's at right now, how much improvement he has shown. So his effective field goal percent was about 50 each of those seasons, right at 50%. This year for Miami, 58.2. And his true shooting percentage, again, he was like at the 53% mark each and every season. So he was this very, very consistent player in terms of his actual efficiency. So from 53 at the true shooting percentage, and it's 63 this year. His 3-point shooting has gone from about being about a 33% shooter in his career to 39 this year. So clearly he's more efficient. I think he's taken good shots. I think the confidence is there. He looks like, essentially, and I bet every coach would tell you this, he's kind of playing the way that a lot of coaches have envisioned him being, this complete player, a guy that can get to the rack, a guy that can shoot threes. And again, a guy that can defend and rebound. So he's just kind of really putting it all together. And it's essentially what Miami needs. And he's really shown himself as one of the best guards in the ACC. And clearly what's interesting, we'll touch on Isaiah Wong in a second here, but that's what stands out to me with Cam. I think he's been a great leader for this team, and certainly they're going to have to rely on him to play well, not just this stretch, but just the rest of the season. He's got to continue to be this really productive guy, even if his numbers come down a little bit. But he's done such a good job, and a 12-game sample size has been a good size in my mind. I think he can continue to set career marks in these efficiency numbers.
I mean, I think you can argue, with the exception of Williams on Wake Forest and maybe Wendell Moore with how efficient he's been this year, that he's been the most complete scorer in the ACC so far, because he's 6th in the ACC in field goal percentage. He's top 5 in free throw percentage, not to mention he's 5th in the ACC at getting to the line. So not only is he scoring a lot at the line, but he's had 67 free throw attempts through 12 games. And he's started to shoot better from the perimeter. He's been on and off from the perimeter, but he just hit 6 threes in their win over Stetson. He hit his first 6 in that game, and then he missed 2 at the end, just trying to get to his career high. But anytime you can get over 20 plus 4 times at home in a season, that's impressive. But when you do it 4 times in 6 games already, I mean, it's been masterful for him at times. You've just watched him play against, whether it was UCF or Lipscomb or Stetson, or even the way he played against Clemson in the second half, or the way he played in that tournament. He's just been so consistent and efficient throughout this year that he's given Miami like that legitimate number 2 option next to Wong, or even, if you want to say it, the number 1 option.
What is your take on Isaiah? And I'll chime in a little bit, but just maybe the season he's had, because again, he comes into the season as the number 1 guy. Had the better season last year, better than Cam. But he hasn't put up the scoring numbers that he did last year. It's very close, and we can get into that. But what's your take on Isaiah through these 12 games here?
I mean, he's still been good. He just didn't hit the heights that he hit at the start of last year. Last year, he opened the season with double figures in his first 8 games. He's had double figures in 11 straight now. He really struggled in the opening night game against Canisius, where he had just 7 points. And the 3-point shooting hasn't quite been there where I thought it was going to be. He's shooting around, I believe, 29% from 3-point. He was 26% going into that Stetson game. Then he hit 3 threes in that game. But he's felt more complete this season. He started crashing the glass a lot more recently. He's getting his shots in a barrage of areas. He's not necessarily only getting his points in the paint or only getting his mid-range. You've seen him kind of develop his game in different ways in each and every game. He also has dealt with a couple of lingering issues to start the year. He had that sinus infection in the Orlando tournament and the Penn State game that really forced him to struggle in those games. But you've seen him grow his confidence back in these last couple games. And I think all it's going to take is for him to have one really big game, one game where he's got 22 or 25, and then he's going to start scoring the way we saw him score last year.
And I was touching on some of the efficiency numbers with Cam McGusty. Isaiah's surprisingly, maybe to some, that he's actually higher than he was a year ago. The thing that's not really happening is that 3-point shot, but I look at it, maybe it's a small sample size. I did the math. If he made 4 more of his 50 attempts, his percentage would be right there with what it was last year. Now, it's still 4 more shots, but I don't think he's that far off as what it might seem. His 2-point field goal percent has increased quite a bit. So he's over 60% from 2. He was under 49 last year. So I think these are positive signs. I don't think he's any lesser of a player. You touched on a couple things he's been dealing with, and I think what Miami fans should be excited about is that Cam is really progressing to where he's at, and Isaiah, I think, still has all the ability that he showed last year. And I think the combination of these two guys, because they can fill it up as good as anyone in the conference, and they can do it in different ways. I think with Isaiah drives a little bit better than Cam. Cam can maybe shoot the outside shot a little bit better, but both of them are really working on, they get to the line now that we've seen Cam do that quite a bit. So I think both of these guys are natural scorers. And I think that going into most games, I mean, they're going to be two of the higher scoring scores in the game itself. And I think that definitely helps because I think they can play off each other quite well. And I still expect Isaiah to have a strong season. And, I think it's going to be a duo to watch. And one of those top duos in the ACC is because, again, the emergence, the more efficiency, the more production from Cam with what we've seen, because I think Isaiah, like you said, he's like one big game away. And we've certainly seen it already. It's not something that you're waiting for him to prove himself, because he did. He proved himself last year. And I think it's just a matter of time.
And I think some of the things that were happening last year for Isaiah are still there. I mean, the control that he has with the ball in his hands, where he's able to fade away and draw contact, are still there. The physicality that he shows when he goes to the paint is still there. The ability with the ball in his hands, the defense is still there. It's just a matter of having that one big game, because he's had double figures in pretty much every game this year, but it's been quiet double figure games where he hasn't been leading the team in scoring all of the time, but he's been there consistently in these last couple of games. But I think the other thing that stands out is every part of this starting lineup that Miami has mostly used this season, of Wong, McGusty, Charlie Moore, Jordan Miller, and Sam Wardenberg, is they've all done different things. Charlie's really started to pass like we thought he was going to. He had 8 assists in that last game, shooting 33% from 3. In some games, he's been really on. In some games, he's been really off. But if you can get him to be really on in ACC play, you give a lot of teams a big worry, because if you have that guy who he hit 5 threes in one game against Florida A&M. Now, I know that's not the greatest opponent, but he had double figures in 3 consecutive games during that Orlando stretch, and then he had 12 points against Penn State. That's something that you really have to guard. And then Jordan Miller recently has been very good. He's been awesome on the glass. He's had 29 boards in his last 3 games going into ACC play. He had 11 rebounds, and he doesn't even have to score the ball. I mean, against Stetson, and I know Stetson aren't the biggest opponent, but he only had 1 point in that game. You still felt his presence when he was on the court with how much he was rebounding. He had 4 offensive rebounds, led to a bunch of second chance points. And Sam Wardenberg this year, touched on it a little bit, he's shooting 42% from 3, and he's making people have to guard him at the perimeter, which just gives so many options for the other guys to have.
So Miami, we touched on the strengths with our guards, with Cam and Isaiah, and like you said, Charlie's shown flashes. And so the front court is kind of the weakness of this team, the bulk inside, the ability to either defend in the paint or, with rebounding and these kind of things. It'll be very interesting to see how they kind of make this transition into, full on ACC play, facing some bigger guys. NC State comes in with a guy there, Dewana, with really good size. What's your take on what we've seen with the front court? We've touched on Jordan Miller, with Sam, kind of playing that 5 spot. Rodney Miller's been out, but he wasn't playing that much in general, even when he was healthy. Mm-hmm. And then, Dane Gack is still on the roster. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how well or how efficient they can be on the defensive end, make sure they can, because they've got to be able to prevent people from really just getting in the paint at ease and finish around the rim. Or else they're just going to score a lot of points on you.
Yeah, NC State's going to be the first big test. But overall, I think the 2 starting members of this front court really had to adjust back into playing. Obviously, Sam Wardenberg has been in the program for 6 years now, but not playing basketball for over a year takes a lot of adjustment to playing, just practicing in an empty gym, to playing with your teammates, to playing against, big and physical players that are competing, really intensely against you. So that takes some adjustment. Jordan Miller definitely had to do some adjustment. He was more used to having the ball in his hands a lot of the time. For George Mason, he had 15.5 points per game for them last year. He was used to being the guy with the ball in his hands, but he's started to learn to do better off the ball. He's had some really nice off-ball cuts in the last couple of games. As mentioned, he's started to rebound a lot better. So it's been an adjustment period, and it's gotten better from where it was at the start of the year, because those first couple games against UCF and FAU, they were really not doing a good job on the boards, but they've started to clean it up over this win streak.
So Miami's got 3 freshmen on the team. Wugo Poplar and Bensley Joseph settling into some reserve roles, averaging about 12 minutes a game. And then Ja'Kai Robinson hasn't played yet. But just what are you seeing with the freshmen? Because Wugo's kind of giving him some offense off the bench. Bensley's not really looking for a shot that often, but he's trying to run the offense at that point guard spot, or just giving some minutes off the bench at the guard spot. But both of those two guys, now they've got a little bit of a taste. They've got to continue to be productive in their roles. What's your takeaway from the freshmen? What have you seen from the freshmen so far?
I think they're kind of opposites in a sense. I think Bensley's earned his spot in the lineup because of his defense, whereas Poplar's earned his way in because of his flashes on offense. Poplar's shown his talents in some games. He had 8 points against Stetson, played really well at FAU in that road win. Without him, they probably lose that game with the amount of points that he gives off the bench. But Joseph doesn't really look for his shots, as you mentioned. He's only taken 5 threes this year, but he's made 4 of them. He's got a good shot, but he's just focused more on the defensive side of the game, which is huge for Miami, because having a defensive first guard that you can use sort of as like a Patrick Beverly role that the Los Angeles Clippers used over the last couple of years is big for this team, because I can't remember the last time that Miami really had a defensive first point guard. But the one issue is with Miami, outside of the rebounding, is they don't have a legitimate bench presence. Anthony Walker started the season hot, but he's been cold recently. And I don't think Poplar can take that mantle by himself yet. So I think one of Poplar or Joseph really has to step up over these next 3 games to give Miami that legitimate option off of the bench. Because against these ACC teams, looking at non-conference play, some of these teams can have guys that, you got 3 players that can score consistently, maybe even just 2. In the ACC, you're going to have teams that have 5 or 6 players that can score in double figures without a worry. And for Miami, you really have 3, maybe 4. But if you can have that one extra guy off the bench, whether it's Walker or either of those 2 freshmen we're talking about, that would be huge.
Yeah, so that's going to wrap things up, Cal. Man, I appreciate you taking the time. We ran through the team, but let's do these updates maybe a little more frequently as the ACC competition gets going. A lot of exciting things. I think people, again, if you're just jumping on board, a lot of information on this video. Hopefully you guys liked it. We'll keep this thing going, and I'll let you get going, Cal. But I appreciate the time, and it's good talking some hoops with you.